Moments sitting. Just to transition from whatever we've been doing just before. So let's just allow the body to settle down onto the chair or the floor. Let the breathing settle. Tuning into the four diaphragms, letting them participate and breathing in a completely receptive, even effortless way. And checking that we're yielding the weight of the body up to gravity. Being aware of the body, being aware of Vedana, being aware of flow, not leaving anything out. Got anything uncomfortable, turning towards it in the wise way I mentioned yesterday, not the octopus, but just a gentle turning towards, breathing it in, breathing out, release. Ease, metta towards ourselves. Good. So welcome everybody back again. And yeah, you can do these little micro practices at any time during the day. They can be really, really helpful. If we're feeling a bit agitated or stressed, just stop, breathe, rest, turn towards, breathe in the discomfort, the resistance, breathe out, release and ease. It can be really, really effective. Okay, so today we're going to move on to the Chitta section of the Satipatthana Sutta. And then we'll do some more Lojong in the second half of the morning, empathizing with the fact that we all have Chitta going on, with all the consequences that follow. And just to say, I did get a couple of questions emailed that I'll respond to in the second half of the morning. So Chitta, what is meant by this word Chitta? And it can be things like the shape of the heart-mind. So Chitta is the heart-mind continuum. And as I said the other day, the idea of the body being the head being separate from the body is a very Western idea. Comes from Descartes centuries ago. But in the Eastern traditions, the body and mind are all seen as a continuum of experience. And Chitta really is the emotional and thinking dimensions. And the way I tend to teach it is trying to keep it simple. One can get into a tangle of what's an emotion and what's a thought. But in my experience and the many people that I've taught, it seems that generally they co-arise, or they often co-arise. So if we think of our thoughts, they very, very often have an emotional component, almost always. And our emotions almost always have a thinking component. There are exceptions. Sometimes if we're completely caught up in an emotional state, it might seem like there's very little thinking going on. But for the purposes of practicing, I think it's almost universal that our thoughts and our emotions co-arise. So you might have a thought process like, you're ruminating on something that somebody said to you. So, why did they say that? And what did they mean? And how dare they? And these kind of thoughts, that will certainly have emotions involved. Emotions of confusion, upset, maybe anger and resentment. If you're obsessing about all the emails you're going to have at the end of the retreat, I'm going to have so many emails, how am I going to cope? That will almost certainly have an emotional component of anxiety, fear, excuse me, sort of anticipatory anxiety. That's a really interesting emotion where we're kind of practicing, we're practicing being anxious in the future, in the present. It's utterly futile, but very common. I think that's a very, very interesting one, anticipatory anxiety. So for the purposes of today's practice, we're looking at the whole emotional thinking component in quite a broad sense. So it's the kind of shape of the heart mind, and is it moving towards release or is it moving towards contraction? That's the essential underlying question we can ask of ourselves. So it's our broad inclinations and tendencies, as well as the ethical status of our mind. Let me just wait 1 minute while I just... Yes, so I think maybe what we'll do now is I'll go through the section of the sutta and then I can unpack it, having actually heard the words of the sutta. Let's go there next. Oops, I've got Vedana there. I didn't change that. That should say chitta. So I just had a little mental emotional burp then. Like, oh, and I made a mistake. So chitta. And this is the verse in the sutta. How does she, in regard to the mind, abide contemplating the mind? Here she knows a lustful mind to be lustful, and a mind without lust to be without lust. She knows an angry mind to be angry, and a mind without anger to be without anger. She knows a deluded mind to be deluded, and a mind without delusion to be without delusion. She knows a contracted mind to be contracted, and a distracted mind to be distracted. She knows a great mind to be great, and a narrow mind to be narrow. She knows a surpassable mind to be surpassable, and an unsurpassable mind to be unsurpassable. She knows a concentrated mind to be concentrated, and an unconcentrated mind to be unconcentrated. She knows a liberated mind to be liberated, and an unliberated mind to be unliberated. And then we've got the refrain, the chorus. In this way, in regards to the mind, she contemplates the mind internally, externally, internally, and externally. She abides contemplating the nature of arising, of passing away, of both arising and passing away in regard to the mind. Mindfulness that there is a mind is established in her to the extent necessary for bare knowledge and continuous mindfulness. And she abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That is how, in regards to the mind, she abides contemplating the mind. Okay, so you've got these great categories of chitta, and then you've got the way we can use awareness of chitta to move towards freedom, the insight dimension. So I have a mind internally, you have a mind externally, and the Lojong addresses that directly. I'm aware of the impermanent nature of my mind, and I'm using my awareness of a mind for bare knowledge and continuous mindfulness. That's the purpose, so that I can abide independently without clinging. And independent here doesn't mean as a kind of separate autonomous being, but it means independent of all the kleshas, of all the ways that my relative mind sticks to things. So mind is I always find the word mind very, very confusing in Buddhism, because it can mean, my individual mind, or sometimes it's used to mean absolute bodhicitta, big mind. So what we're referring to here is one's individual psycho-emotional processes, the chitta. So we are aware in ourselves of what's actually happening. Again, keep it simple. What is actually happening right now, mentally and emotionally? That's the practice here. And then we can apply these different questions in terms of whether things are present or absent. So I'll come on to that now. The section's really got the chitta section of the suta's got 4 different ways of looking at the mind. There's the ethical dimension, there's the condition of the mind, the quality of the mind, and is it free? So I'll go into these individually now. I can see lots of you writing lots of notes. That these will all be available, these presentations. Well, they are available straight away on the Padlet board at the end of the session. So the ethical status of chitta. So we just know, is greed present in me, or is greed absent in me right now? So we get very curious about our direct experience.
No, Billy.
Oh, I think someone's talking to their dog or their cat. That was a lovely moment. So the fever of lust is like being on fire from within. There is no fire like lust in the Dhammapada. So greed generally has a pulling in tendency. It's like, oh, I want more, come to me, and we hold on. Yeah. So it's a pulling in tendency energetically. Is hatred present or not? Aversion present or not? The physical tension of anger is like being overpowered and controlled by a forceful opponent. It can really feel like that, can't it? You're caught up in some anger, frustration, irritation, aversion. There's a physical tension associated with that, like being overpowered and controlled by a forceful opponent. In the Dhammapada, there is no grip like anger. And this is a pushing away tendency. It's like, I don't like it. I don't like you. I don't like it. I don't like anything. Go away. I hate you. Yeah, that's the energy of anger. And just in case none of you have ever experienced that, I thought I'd better just let you know from my own experience. And then delusion or not. Is there delusion or not in my mind? The confusion of delusion is like being hopelessly entangled in a net. The Dhammapada, there is no net like delusion. And this is a running around in circles tendency energetically. So greed, oh, come to me. Aversion, go away. Confusion, oh, I don't know what's happening. I don't know what to do. I'm confused. I don't know what I'm thinking. I don't know what I'm feeling. So it's like being hopelessly entangled in a net. And doesn't it feel like that? It's like, you're getting searching for clarity, and it's like whichever way you reach, it's like you just get all tangled up. So it's a tangled up mind. So we have a push me mind, a pull you mind, and a tangled up mind. And we're just aware of, is that present or not? And with Satipatthana practice, the main transformative aspect is awareness itself. Because if we have our intention established, our going for refuge established, if we become aware of greed, of pulling towards, it will be quite natural to release, because you don't want to be more greedy. So you become aware of it, and that awareness itself is the transformative agent. Again, hatred, we become aware of it, and in that awareness, we will probably release it a little bit. Being aware of anger is very, very different experience from being completely lost in anger, as I'm sure you all know. You might not feel love in the next moment. The anger might come back in the next moment, and again, but we're bringing in awareness just to gradually tease that apart. Delusion's more difficult, of course, because delusion, you don't know what the hell's going on. So it's more difficult to bring awareness to that. But even being able to name it, this is confusion. I'm confused. That's bringing clarity into the situation. And in the condition of our chitta, we're noticing, is it contracted or is it distracted? So contracted is rigid and narrow. It's where things, all the possibilities narrow down and your mind feels very kind of tight. And it's all your energy is getting contracted and drawn in. And sloth and torpor can be the hindrance that can arise with a contracted mind. It's like all the creative edges disappear and it just gets more and more and more shrunk down. And then our energy starts dissipating and we have a very sort of sluggish mind. And then distracted is the outcome of pursuing sensuous pleasure as an end in itself. Yeah, so it's like the monkey mind. Oh, I want that. Oh, I want that. Oh, shall I do this next? Or shall I do that next? Oh, I might have an ice cream. Oh, I just checked my Facebook. So it's restlessness and worry. This kind of restless mind, very unpleasant, distracted. Yeah. And it's possible, it's just possible on this retreat, you may be experiencing that arising, because a lot of the material on this retreat is very, very challenging. You know, we're being asked to really unwind the structure of the ego, and the ego will not be happy about that. So you may be finding distraction arising even more than usual. If that's the case, again, you just notice that. You think, distraction. 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 Yeah. With this good humor that I've been really strongly encouraging the whole week. It's not like, oh no, I'm a bad person, I'm distracted. I shouldn't be distracted. It's like, distraction. Interesting. So what is the nature of distraction? What is going on? You know, what's underneath that? It's like I'm challenged. Okay, good. Let's sit with that. Let's breathe that in. So that's how we work with these things. The quality of chitta, is it great and vast or not? And it's a beautiful thing when you have these moments, where you think, there's a kind of opening, a sackling sense of a vast ocean or the sky. And we just learn how to rest there. We don't go, I want more, because that will just kill it off. But it's like, let's just rest there. This is what a vast mind tastes like, feels like. Breathe, rest, breathe, rest, breathe, rest. Yeah. And that kind of quality will arise through identifying the unworldly, pleasant chitta, Vedana, like we talked about yesterday. There'll be sensations. We just learn how to rest there. Is there further to go or not? Now that for perhaps all of us, we'll think, there is further to go. But we recognize that. And as I said yesterday, that's also considered an unworldly Vedana, like, there's further to go. I can release into even more growth. That's considered to be highly skillful. And is it concentrated or not? Is your mind beginning to settle into much more clarity or not? And you just recognize that. And then is your mind and heart free? And this is interesting because, of course, from a certain point of view, probably none of us have got completely free chitta, but we may have little glimpses where the sludge begins to fall away. And again, we recognize that and rejoice in that. So it's not like you're completely ignorant and then you're completely enlightened, I don't think. I mean, I don't really know, but I think it's much more of a gradual process. It's just little glimpses. Initially, there's just the whole weight of sludge and tiny little glimpses of something. And then as we practice, it's maybe a little bit less sludge and a few more glimpses. So it's the model of you got the scales and these little grains of gold dust on one side. And then eventually the scales rebalance and the gold dust is weightier than the sludge. So as I said yesterday, the kind of spirit or the attitude we bring to this practice is recognizing when we're tight and releasing, using awareness as that doorway to release. It's in practice, extremely simple practice. And I think with the Dharma, we can always complicate. Like you might have already be thinking, I can't remember all those things she just said about all those different aspects of chitta. Doesn't matter. I'm telling you all those because I want to honor the Buddha, and they are actually very interesting. But in practice, it's like noticing, am I moving towards contraction in my mind and my heart, or am I moving towards release in my mind and my heart? And if we're moving towards contraction, we notice that, oh, I'm feeling tight, release. And doing that, making that choice is a movement towards freedom. From a karmic point of view, chitta is active. So awareness of our chitta is also extremely important because it's generating consequences. Because our emotional life, motion, it's got movement, and that is seeding future karmic consequences. The Vedana was a resultant of the past, it's already arrived. And then, but if we're in, say, an angry state where we're churning out future consequences. So it's important to recognize that as well. And of course, the thing about a sutta like this is it sounds like everything's, I have my Vedana, I have my chitta, I have my body. It's not like that. We just have life. But it's a bit like with the Satipatthana, we're getting a microscope out and we're just beginning to investigate these different doorways into this experience of being alive. Which is a highly effective training method. But the result isn't that we live this kind of very compartmentalized life where I'm only going to be aware of my body, I'm only going to be aware of my Vedana, I'm only going to be aware of my chitta. We're aware of everything, but today we're coming through the chitta doorway to train so that we can have more awareness of what our emotional, mental continuum is like. Okay, so let's have a go at practicing this. First of all, let's just take a moment to have a stretch if we feel we need a stretch. I'm just going to stand up for a minute myself. Again, these transitions are very important. I think we don't always talk about it enough. It's a bit like we just habitually slump into our meditation posture, but it's really good to think, do I need a minute just to stretch and prepare my body? Okay, so I'll just lead us through an investigation of chitta using non-reactive receptive awareness as our transformative agent. It's a very light, sort of delicate approach. So to begin with, let's settle into our position. Yielding the weight of the body up to gravity again. Exploring this very interesting distinction between collapsing and yielding. So yielding, there is a sense of release and yet vitality. Feeling into the points of contact between the body and the chair, the floor, the bed. And maybe releasing a little bit more with each out breath, letting the breath flow all the way out and the in breath flow in its own time. How are the four diaphragms getting on? Softening at the back of the throat, soft belly, soft buttocks. Letting the brain be soft. And being aware of breathing in the whole body. The volume of the whole body expanding a little bit in all directions on the in-breath and subsiding a little bit in all directions on the out-breath. And beginning to tune into our mental emotional continuum as it flows through the moments. Doing a kind of audit in a way with our awareness. What is actually happening? Turning towards it with this kindly, curious awareness, not the octopus on the face. And neither are we turning away, but we're including the mental, emotional continuum in our field of awareness without resistance. And asking ourselves a question, is greed present anywhere in my experience or not? It might be thoughts that have a craving component, it might be an emotion that's got a pulling inwards towards us, feeling energetically. The wanting mind, I want more. Just dropping in that question with curiosity. desire? Is desire present in me? And what about aversion? The pushing away energy, maybe even hatred. Is that present in me, or am I free of that at the moment? Be careful not to judge. The purpose of this way of practicing is simply to know what is going on in honesty, kindly curiosity, and what happens when you bring awareness to that experience in the light of our commitment, our going for refuge, our faith. Is there anything in your emotions or thoughts that's got the not wanting flavor? If you've got something like physical pain, the practice here is to examine the thoughts and the emotions that we layer on top, pushing away the not wanting. And what happens when you rest in these and allow them to release in the light of awareness? Is delusion present in me or not? A sense of going round and being entangled in a net. Don't know what's going on, don't know what we feel, don't know what we want or don't want. Don't know what we're supposed to be doing. Don't understand anything. Again, the practice is to be aware of this, shine the light of awareness into this fog of confusion. That is the practice rather than judging the confusion and feeling we're failing. You think, this is confusion, this is delusion. I'm aware of my delusion, and then see what happens when you bring awareness to confusion. You're no longer confused, you're aware of your confusion. Is my mind contracted, tight, narrow, dull, or not? Is it a mind full of flexibility, possibility, creativity, or is it shutting down, closing down, energetically dull, tight, narrow? What happens when you bring awareness to this if it is indeed present? And what happens when you notice the absence of that? Or we can ask ourselves, is my mind distracted? My chitta, my heart mind, my emotions, my thoughts? Chasing sensuous pleasure, stimulating thoughts, fantasies of food. What's coming next? Whatever it might be. The restlessness, the worry. Mustn't forget, must do this, must do that. What happens when you notice that kind of mind and heart continuum in the light of awareness? Always using the body as the place of stability and rest. Sorry, ignore that. And now asking ourselves, does my mind, heart feel vast or not? Seeing if we can find any little seeds of release, openness, expansiveness in the heart mind. And what happens when we rest there without grasping, without craving? Just breathing with these experiences. Maybe images might help, the images of clear blue sky or a vast, still ocean. Allowing the mind to rest there, the heart to rest there. Is concentration present or not? And in this sense, concentration is stability, a stable quality of awareness. It's not straining to concentrate, but resting in this quality of openness to the extent that it's present. And allowing our awareness to become integrated around this experience. The mind doesn't have any quality of vastness or concentration, then we're just aware of that with curiosity. This is what it feels like when my mind isn't vast, it's not concentrated. That's also the awareness practice. But the seeds of release, they're always there. Somewhere in our experiences, little tiny moments of opening, release, and we notice this and we rest there and we breathe. Maybe these are little tastes of freedom. Knowing this is a mind moving towards freedom. And if there isn't anything, we just know this is what it feels like when my mind isn't moving towards freedom. And we notice that. So with awareness practice, there's never any sense of failure because we're aware of whatever's happening. We bring it into awareness. We entrust it to our going for refuge, to our faith. Should be movement from contraction to release at all times and in all ways. Bringing the weight of the body to the foreground of awareness. Yielding quality, resting quality into our posture, breathing in the whole body. As we bring the practice to a close, bringing everything with us, our body, sensations, Vedana, Chitta, awareness. And there's always this very simple, overarching question we can ask: am I moving towards contraction or am I moving towards release? Moving the body however we want to. So let's just have a few minutes hearing from a couple of people maybe about what you noticed in that practice. What was your experience in that practice? Doing this kind of audit of your mental emotional continuum. Okay, so Nikki, you were first.
What I noticed was I was feeling like in a really open, sort of spacious place. And then when I woke this morning, sorry, I'll just go back a bit. When I woke this morning, I definitely had aversion. I was feeling a bit miserable about something that's gone on this week. And it passed. I did this sort of curiosity, and it transformed with bringing sort of a sense of what I could be grateful for around the situation. So I kind of worked through that. But during this practice, I was feeling quite open and spacious. And then I noticed that my mind started to almost sort of pick up on that aversion again from this morning. And I thought, and then an emotional sort of context came in, and I thought, this isn't, like you were asking, like right here, right now. And I thought, this is this morning's, this isn't here. It was almost like my memory wanted to sort of gather up that aversion and bring it into the practice. It actually wasn't there in that moment. Does that make sense?
It does, but
it passed when I recognized that that wasn't actually my current present moment experience. It dropped away.
Okay, so what was that process of reflection for you? If you talk about it as an awareness practice, there you were sitting there and you had it was present because you were having those experiences in the present, but then it sounded like you went through a reflection process that helped you release around that. So what was that process?
I was looking for sort of sensation, like right here, right now, and I couldn't really find it. I couldn't find it. I thought, this is memory. This is not. It just wanted to jump on the bus, kind of thing,
Yeah. And then when you realized, oh, it's memory, it's not really here, what happened?
It passed away.
Mm.
It didn't fit with current experience. It wasn't present.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really great example of how we, you can create a whole sort of narrative just based on memory and expectation. That we sort of expect it to be present, and then when you come closer, use your awareness practice as you did. It sounded like, what I'm really interested in, it sounded like you had the thoughts, but you didn't actually have the emotional experience in the present.
That's right.
You had the thoughts about a previous emotional experience.
Exactly that.
And when you became aware of that, which is the mindfulness aspect, it faded away.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, very good. So that's definitely mindfulness of chitta. Yeah. And the consequence was it just went.
Yeah, release.
Yeah, just released. And that's also a really good description of how simple it can be. When we sort of just bring an awareness, an emotional state that obviously had been intense in the past a few hours ago. You didn't need to have it in the present, and it was fairly easy. Well, it was very easy to release it because it wasn't actually even there in the present emotionally. Yeah, interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Angie, you were next.
Hi. When I went looking for thoughts, the first thing I realised was how much thoughts slowed down when I went looking for them, which was a bit, whoa, that's interesting. There's a lot more spaciousness there, but most of my thoughts were of distraction, thinking ahead, planning ahead, which I was able to kind of feel that urge to think ahead and just come back to the body, come back to the breath, release. And I was literally distracted at one point by my daughter, but I was able to get back into the meditation. And worrying, which was, is my daughter okay? Has she got enough work to do? Oh, that's a worrying thought. Just come back, release. So for me, it was just about coming back to the body and the breath. And I was able to do that more readily with that sense of what's the next thought going to be? Nothing. So by asking that question myself, it just created space. That's kind of waiting. There's a sense of spaciousness, and then something would come along.
What was the kind of emotional flavour of that spaciousness?
Kind of pleasurable, but not in a kind of grasping, pleasurable way. In a kind of relaxed, open, breathing out, embracing way.
So that's also very interesting, that the absence of thought, it's not just a big sort of dull nothingness, but the absence of thought has got this felt quality of vitality, of aliveness, which is, I think, the nature of the blue sky. The classic thing, the classic description is that our awareness, our sort of innate awareness, if you like, the potential of bodhicitta, absolute bodhicitta, or big mind, is vast like a clear blue sky, and then our thoughts are like clouds passing across the sky. So another way of talking about this is we're shifting from climbing inside our thoughts and being completely over-identified with them to resting back in awareness itself, and then letting the thoughts come and go. But it's interesting, isn't it, that you were, it sounds like you were surprised at how few thoughts there were.
Yeah, when you're kind of looking for them, they suddenly scurry away. Where have they gone?
They're little tricksters, aren't they? And again, that's such a fascinating practice, maybe for all of us. Just during the day, we might have expectations that our mind is completely crowded out, and then when we turn to look at them, it's like, oh, there's not so many after all. Having said that, statistically, there have been some studies done. I'm not sure about how good these studies are, but nonetheless, I think they're interesting. That shows that the average person has between 30,000 and 70,000 thoughts a day. So generally speaking, there are quite a lot of thoughts going on. Apparently, at least 95% of them we've had before. So we just got the same old chuntering around. And in the untrained person, about 75% of them are negative, which is very, very interesting. You know, if you think that you're skewing towards negative thinking and emotional states, that is, it's partly to do with our evolution, the way we've evolved with a very strong threat awareness, because we need that to survive. But that can become very distorted. And in olden times, we'd be frightened of obvious things like saber-toothed tigers, whereas now the scientists are suggesting that the main threat is social threat these days. What do people think of me? Have I said that right? Oh no, they don't like me. And of course, that's all really exacerbated by things like social media. So we have all those hormones of threat being triggered all the time just by the fullness of the modern world. So interesting. And at the same time, what you've described, Angie, which I think is also true, is we might have tens of thousands of thoughts a day, but that's when we're not practicing awareness. But when we're practicing awareness, we are allowing something else to arise. And what we're allowing to arise is this other quality of awareness, or the awareness which is always there behind all this parade of thoughts, which has spaciousness as its nature and openness. So really interesting. And also you've described that practice of just coming back to the body and the breath. Okay, so thanks, Angie. Let's just hear from Emma.
Yeah, what a super interesting exercise. It really shone a light on the pairing of two things that I feel as if they're quite opposite in a way. So I noticed I was experiencing a lot of aversion, but in terms of I think work issues, actually, things I don't want to do, things I'm pushing away, like, oh, I don't want to do that, I don't want to do that. So there was a strong presence of aversion. But when it came to the section around distraction, I'd got also a lot of the things that you were saying, the kind of to do, I mustn't forget, which were also the work things. So there was this kind of almost like kind of crazy ricochet between not wanting to do these things and yet at the same time being pulled endlessly towards thinking I must do them, I must do it, and so this relationship between aversion and distraction. I think sometimes I think of distraction being, I think the way that you were sort of saying it is a sort of desiring or sensuous desire for pull for something. And it just struck me interesting that the pull was these things that I feel aversion towards. But I guess I was thinking a bit about the mutual relationship between aversion and distraction, because actually the things in themselves aren't so bad. I'm averse to them because I'm very distracted and they feel overwhelming. Yeah. And I feel distracted because I'm averse to the things. So I just think, wow, those two states of mind are completely supporting one another in a bit of a spiral really at the moment. And I don't think I've seen that quite so clearly before. So I feel very grateful for that.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, really. Thank you so much. So maybe the rest of us can also think about that. Is there a relationship between pushing things away and then endlessly thinking about them in that kind of distracted way? I suspect that is quite common. That's really fascinating. Thank you. Yeah. It's interesting. One of the stories about banter that I've always really enjoyed, because I have a mind that is a bit like yours, or it has changed, thankfully, over the years, but I used to do a lot of, I mustn't forget to remember that I mustn't forget the thing that I'm trying not to remember. I mustn't forget to remember the thing that I'm trying not to remember. The thing I'm pushing away, I mustn't forget, and being caught up in this agitation, which is a sort of sense desiring that the mind is wanting stimulation, And what Bante used to do apparently is he would decide, I'm going to think about a certain topic at 2 o'clock on a Thursday, say. So rather than just having something filling his mind all the time, he would think, no, I'm going to schedule that in, and I'm going to sit down and I'm going to think that thing through. And I have really taken that on board as a practice, and it has been really good. I mean, I'm not nearly as disciplined as I'm sure he was, but learning how to put things down, the things that we don't want to think about, learning how to put them down because we know we are going to actually sit down and properly think them through. That makes a big difference, because I think our minds can be absolutely full of this kind of feverish thinking about the things that we are trying to avoid thinking about, and never thinking about them properly. They're just skittering around because we never give ourselves time to actually just sit down and face up to it, which is what you're talking about, I think, Emma. Probably if you just got on with the things you're resisting at work, you'd be fine. It's just, either sitting down and thinking something through or just getting on with it. They can be quite liberating. All right, then. Thank you so much, Emma and Angie. And sorry, I've lost whoever was beforehand. That was really fascinating. And let's have a break now. Come back at 1:45. And as always, it's not a break from awareness practice. Again, just notice the quality, the content of your heart mind as you have your break. And if you have the little moments of vastness, spaciousness, really dwell there, really enjoy those, notice those and dwell there. Okay, see you soon. Hello, everybody, again. So I've got a couple of questions that have come in about the practice of Tonglen. But I think before we do that, I'm just going to introduce a bit more about the 7-point mind training. So you get the complete picture, as it were, over the retreat. And I also would love to hear if there's any slogans that have been emerging. But let's start there. Let's see if there's anyone got a slogan that you'd be willing to share with the group. You could do it in the chat box, or you could do it. Yeah, let's do it in the chat box. So here we are. We got Alison. It's not about you. That's a very good one. It's not about you. Meaning it's not about oneself. Thank you. Good one. Little pith instruction to oneself. Kat, there is suffering, there is love. That's really good. Natalie, not mine, but in the spirit. It's happening for me. It's happening for me, not to me. Wow, that's good. It's happening for me, not to me. Resistance is futile. Sangadashini, Emma. Stop holding, allow oneself to be held. Wow, these are so good. Stop holding, allow oneself to be held. Annette and Rainy Swansea. There is always another perspective. There is always another perspective. Helen, I notice my edges soften and lean outwards. Wow. I notice my edges soften and lean outwards. Joe, others suffer just as I suffer. Others suffer just as I suffer. Vimokshini, whatever we say or do is just an offering, not mine. Wow, these are fantastic, everybody. Thank you. Alison, our thoughts aren't real. Our thoughts aren't real. Mo, this air we share, this air is you, this air is me. So where do you begin and me end? That's a lifetime's reflection just on that one. Where do you end? Where do you begin and me end? Kara, sorry if I pronounced that wrongly. Dalai Lamas. Everyone wants to be happy, no one wants to suffer. That's at the absolute root of all these practices, this view that nobody wants to suffer and we all want to be happy, and that is what unites us in the human predicament. Adele, freeing from the chains of selfing into love. Freeing from the chains of selfing into love. Caroline, being a compassionate warrior, watching the mirror becoming a window, breathing deeply, stepping through, rising together. God, these are so moving. I feel quite emotional. Mary, drive all blames into one. Bryony, look after B, but always connect to others. Atulia Mitra, they're just like me. Lisa, we're in Samsara together. Janice, peel the octopus from your face and feel the warm sun. Fantastic. Yeah, peel the octopus from your face and feel the warm sun. Amy, I have a body. We all do. Inga, energy and love are just there. They are not mine or yours. Paula, this is a natural conditioned human response. Calling it mine makes no sense. Yeah, this is a natural conditioned response. Calling it mine makes no sense. Janet, life is short, just keep loving. Life is short, just keep loving. Marion, each drop of compassion can create an ocean of loving kindness. Each drop of compassion can create an ocean of loving kindness. Michelle, how does other feel? How does other feel? Mary, smack the pig on the nose. That's very Lojong, smack the pig on the nose. Angie, come home to the heart of love. Shivala Malini, this too is how it is to be alive. So these are amazing. So what we'll do, Taraloka team, if you could save this chat, and it would be really amazing if somebody, one of you, could turn it into a Word document, and then we can share it with everybody. If you are really, really clever, you could turn it into a word cloud, but please don't. If you don't know how to do that, then don't bother. And here's another slogan from Taraloka. Yes, we'll do that. That's the best one of all. Yes, we'll do that. Thank you. Wow, I find those all thrilling, because it's like it's really landing and you're making it your own, which is so, that's what we have to do. They're not just words on a page from somebody in the 10th century, but you're making it all your own. Okay, Vamokshini, another slogan. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Okay, so here we go. We're of time. So moving on to a bit more about the rest of the 7-point mind training. So remembering very light Satipatthana, the whole movement is from contraction to release. That's the momentum that we're going with in our practice. But now the mirror has become the window. So we've done it. We've really sort of turned inwards and we've done that practice together. And now we open the window. It's like, wow, all these other beings are just like me. And they have all these conditioned tendencies towards closing down around the illusory self. And they have the potential to be free of that and to rest in sky-like mind, sky-like awareness. So point 3 of the 7-point mind training is the transformations of adverse conditions onto the path of awakening. And this is practicing Kshanti Paramita. So point 1 was the preliminaries. And then point 2 was the main practice, which is bodhicitta, where we have the perspective of vast, luminous, boundless awareness. And then we have the skillful means, the practice of Tonglen, of exchanging self and other as a means to unwind our habitual circling back to self. So this 1.3, we have the relative bodhicitta, which is the compassion practice, the skillful means in our life, in our actual human life, turn all mishaps onto the path. So don't think, oh no, my life's gone wrong, I've got a mishap. You think, oh, I have a mishap. How can I work with that? Drive all blames into one, which is ego clinging. This is a very powerful one because we're so good at blaming others, aren't we? Or we're good at blaming ourselves. I'm useless, I'm terrible. But from the perspective of these trainings, it's this clinging to the illusory self, which is the real culprit, the real villain in the piece. And be grateful to everyone. So again, it's cultivating this other regarding attitude of gratitude to beings. So even if someone does something that we really don't like, it's like, oh, okay, you're giving me something to practice with. And we have to take all these very much from the perspective that they are a training. They're not sort of metaphysical statements of, you know, we should thank our abuser. It's nothing, it's not on that level. It's much deeper. It's, you know, if we're suffering from abuse of some sort, of course, we will take all steps to, you know, report to the authorities, get justice, protect ourselves, all those kind of things. Of course, we will do all those. It's a method for overcoming this habit of selfing. And one way to do that is to practice gratitude. That's a really, really important point, because otherwise it does sound like it's a training and being a doormat. And that is definitely not what is going on in Lojong. And then the perspective, the absolute bodhicitta perspective, is by meditating on delusive appearances, emptiness becomes the best protection. So really seeing that everything is a fabrication of the mind, in a way, you know, everything is a fabrication. There's the arising and the passing, and the arising and the passing, and then we congeal around that and turn it into a thing. And then we react to that thing. I mean, this is how strange we are as creatures. We sort of make something up, we solidify it, and then we react to it. It's kind of, you know, the Buddha said all worldlings are mad, and he wasn't kidding. So by meditating on delusive appearances, emptiness becomes the best protection. Whatever you meet is the path. It's not like I only want this lovely path over here, and this path's a bit icky. No, that's not really my path. No, this is also your practice. Whatever arrives in your lap is your practice. So as you can see, this is tremendous training in patience, in Kshanti, one of the parameters. Okay, point 4 is make practice your whole life. And this is Virya Paramitar, energy in the pursuit of the good. Cultivate a serious attitude and practice the 5 strengths and the 5 powers. And these are being in touch with motivation, familiarizing ourselves with our experience, following positive seeds, virtuous seeds, renouncing that which holds us back, and being in touch with our aspiration. The 5 balas, I think they're called. And in the traditional training, you do this in life, and you do this at the moment of death, and you do them in a slightly different order at the moment of death when you're doing the Poa practice. And that's something in Tibetan Buddhism where your consciousness leaves the body through the crown of the head in a pure way, but we won't go into that level of detail right now. The main thing is its energy in the pursuit of the good, and you practice staying in touch with your motivation, familiarizing yourself with experience, planting positive seeds, following positive seeds, renouncing that which holds us back, and being in touch with our aspiration. This is a gorgeous, gorgeous quote from Jamgon Kongtrul, who's done a wonderful, wonderful translation of these texts. He was one of the Rime masters, one of the great teachers. I think it was the 19th century Tibetan teachers that were drawing all the disparate schools of Buddhism all together. The Rime masters were very unifying. And there's a book called The Great Path of Awakening, which is his version of the 7-point mind training. But I really love this. From this moment until enlightenment, at least from now until I die, and especially for the next year and the next month, and definitely from today until tomorrow, the two aspects of bodhicitta will never be absent from my mind. So print that out and hang it up on your wall somewhere. It's so good. From this moment until enlightenment, at least from now until I die, and especially for the next year and the next month, and definitely from today until tomorrow, the two aspects of bodhicitta will never be absent from my mind. So he's really chunking it down. You know, it's all very well to think, oh, until enlightenment, but he's saying at all times, and most definitely from today until tomorrow. It's so good. So it's always make this your path, keeping the view, vast luminous awareness, and the practice, exchanging self and other, in order to overcome this habitual circling back to self, and making ourselves more important than others in our awareness. Point 5, the measure of success in mind training, samadhi paramita meditation. All Dharma has a single purpose: uprooting self-importance. Rely on the better of the two witnesses, your conscience, not the opinion of others. Yeah, so always rely on your own ethical conscience, not the opinion of others. Always have the support of a joyful mind, even in adversity. I mean, how challenging is that? You know, you've been told be joyful even in the midst of adversity, and that might just seem absolutely ludicrous. But as a training principle, it's excellent as a training principle. How do we have a joyful mind? Well, the sort of practices we were doing before the break, where we're just examining what's going on. Is it tight? Is it contracted? Is it open? Is it free? Here's those little seeds of release and openness. Let's dwell there. Release, open, release, open. That's joy. That's the taste of joy. And we might actually do that even more in adversity, because we won't be so complacent. Because when times are difficult, the motivation to practice can be stronger, because life is so huge, so unpleasant, that we can feel more in touch with a sense of energy. You are proficient if you can practice even when distracted. So mind training has become second nature. So in the inquiry before the tea break, we heard very eloquent descriptions of practicing even when distracted, by turning your attention towards what was actually going on. Then awareness arose, and then learning arose. So that's a perfect example of practicing even when distracted. Okay, point 6, the commitments of mind training, which is prajna paramita. And I'm not going through all the slogans, because there's 59 slogans. I'm just giving you selected highlights, ones that are particularly juicy. So do not discuss the weaknesses of others. I mean, that's always so tempting, isn't it? To get together and think, oh, that person, you know, they're so useless, and get into sort of collusive undermining conversation. So do not discuss the weaknesses of others. Do not reflect on others' shortcomings. That's a very easy thing to do, in my own experience. Sort of undermining hostile thinking. Give up hoping for results. And this means stay present. Stay with what's actually happening right now. Yeah, obviously we have our faith and our aspiration, but if we're grasping for them and we're trying to live in the future when everything's going to be lovely, that's not mind training. So stay present. Give up poisonous food. So good. Stop poisoning yourself with ego clinging. It's like we feed ourselves this diet of poison, which is coagulating, congealing around this sense of self, and then defending it. self-righteously in all kinds of ways. And if you're feeling provoked by these, that is the whole purpose of the mind training. It's designed to provoke and stir up the way we see things. Stop all resentments and vendettas. Don't be excited by cutting remarks. Don't wait an ambush, waiting for a moment of weakness to wreak revenge. And I'll just say it again, I'm just repeating myself here. These are training principles. And it's not a training in being a doormat. You know, we obviously believe in justice. We believe in the law. We believe in, you know, helping people who are disadvantaged in one way or another. But this is a training for overcoming our attachment to self-importance. Don't strike at the weak point of others. Don't aim to win. Let go of worrying about prestige or reputation. So you get the gist. Don't misuse the remedy, using mind training to manipulate samsara. This is a very important one. I think many of us do actually use our Dharma practice in order to try to get life on our own terms and to manipulate samsara so it's more pleasurable. I think many of us do that. In my own experience, samsara does often become more pleasurable with Dharma practice, but that's a byproduct. It's not a goal. Point 7, the guidelines and precepts of mind training. And again, there's lots of these, but here are a few highlights. Do everything with one intention, to arouse bodhicitta. Apply one remedy in adversity, which is tonglen, exchanging self-centeredness for being other regarding. Don't depend on external conditions. Don't give up if they are difficult. Now, of course, we're trained in Triratna quite rightly about the importance of conditions and trying to create conducive conditions, which is absolutely wonderful, to do everything we can to create ideal conditions or conducive conditions. And sometimes life will come along and dump difficult conditions at our doorstep, or we don't give up then. I think the pandemic is a really good example. Collectively, we've got so-called difficult conditions, although perhaps they are more conducive to mind training than the complacency of pre-pandemic times. I mean, that's what I'm noticing in my own experience. But they're difficult, so don't give up if they're difficult. Right now, practice what matters. Wake up. So right now, wake up. Don't misinterpret. This time, get it right. This is quite, I've sort of pulled bits from different translations here, but it's just giving you a snapshot and a flavor. Don't vacillate. That's a good one, isn't it? Be wholehearted. Don't expect applause. Very good, isn't it? So often we are looking for praise with what we do. So they're very related to the worldly winds of praise and blame and gain and loss and pain and suffering and fame and infamy, the 8 worldly winds. From the Pali Canon, these are very, very similar actually, about overcoming the worldly winds and resting back in this big perspective. Okay. So as I say, I'll make this available as well on the Padlet. So you can look at it all later. I'll also, at some point, I'll do a reading list because I've read all the translations on the 7-point mind training and they're all excellent. And there's a lot of Western teachers, modern Western teachers who've written on this training, I think because it's so useful for the times that we live in. So it's quite, it's very sort of popular teaching. And some of the translations are from sort of classical Tibetan perspective, and some of them are very westernized and very modernized. So Norman Fisher, for example, who's a Zen teacher, he's done a very modern rendering of the mind training slogans. These are things like "give up lunacy," which is very good. Okay, so before we move on to do a practice together, I just want to comment on a couple of questions that have come in. The first one is about when we do the Tonglen aspect in the practice in a moment, and it picks up on the comment yesterday that somebody made about it, or feeling a bit fast. You're sort of breathing in and breathing out, a bit fast to really sort of let the awareness of the other person's suffering sink in, and then a bit fast to breathe out metta. So the person said it felt a bit superficial. So what you could do today, if you wanted to, is spend some time really staying with the in-breath reflections. I don't want you to alter your breath, so don't sort of breathe in longer, but emphasizing reflections on the in-breath for a while. This person's suffering just like me. Who is this person? What might it be like to be them? Yeah, so really sort of allow that to get a bit of momentum, and then spend some time reflecting on the out-breath reflections. May you be well and happy. I give you all my merit. I long for you to be well and happy. I long for you to be free of your suffering. So you can sort of get into the practice that way. You could try that. And then I think what happens very often is once it's got a bit established, then the in-breath and the out-breath, it doesn't feel superficial. It feels like a genuine taking in and sending back, and taking in and giving away, and taking in and sending. It gets its own rhythm. So you could try that today if you wanted to, spending a bit of time. I don't mean emphasizing the in-breath as an actual physical experience, because we don't want to be manipulating the breathing, because what can happen then is you kind of go and that isn't great. But more just emphasizing those reflections, and then spend some time with the out-breath reflections. And again, it's quite common that the breathing can become a bit, we do sort of go, and we're definitely not trying to do that. So it's the natural breath. So we could do that. And then there was another question about boundaries and healthy boundaries. Apparently this came up in one of the groups. Where if it feels like you're really trying to imagine what that person's experience is like, are you kind of invading their boundary a wee bit? And, you can't really know what their experience is like. It's their experience, and maintaining a healthy boundary and not sort of invading that person's space, as it were. So that's a really important question and an interesting question. And I come back again to the fact that Tonglen it's training for you to unwind the endless sort of reification of self, the endless me. And by that, I mean, we obviously need to love ourselves and care about ourselves, but it's this very, very deep, wrong view that we have, the root of delusion of congealing around a fixed and unchanging self, a sort of stuckness. So it's a method for unwinding that. And we're using awareness of others as a way to soften all that. It's like, oh, you're there as well. Oh, gosh, there's another human being there. How amazing. Wow, you. Gosh. Hello, human being. So we're not literally sort of taking on that person's suffering in a kind of... If we take these teachings literally, we get into trouble. But if we take them as a training principle, they work. Because, of course, you can't really, really know what that other person's experience is, and you need to respect their autonomy and their individuality in our sort of relational life. But when we're meditating in order to unwind this endless circling to self, then this imaginative identification with others is a really helpful thing to do. So I hope that's clear. It's a training principle. It's a method. It's a meditative method, but it's not about invading other people's space or presuming to know them better than they know themselves or anything like that. Of course, we, in our work and our lives, we do respect healthy boundaries and respect, respecting others. Okay, so let's do a little practice together. We've just got not so long today, but I really want to do some practice together. So if we set ourselves up in our position, and again, the way we'll do it today, we'll do it fairly simply. We'll first of all do tonglen towards ourselves. This is something that Pema Chodron says, actually, and she's done tons on mind training. And she says, in the West, we really need to start with tonglen for ourselves because so many of us have got poor self-view and so on. So we'll do some tonglen for ourselves, and I'll lead that. Then we'll bring to mind another person, maybe a friend again, and we'll simply rest with our shared humanity, that they too have a mind and a heart and chitta, all the habits of contraction, the longing for release, and we'll breathe all that in and breathe out well-wishing. So let's just set ourselves up in our position. Allowing the weight to settle down into our position. Settling and yielding. Release and yet alive and vital. Breathing in the whole body. Including everything in our awareness, breathing, Vedana, Chitta. And is there anything that has the felt quality of contraction, tightness, resistance, stuckness in the body, the heart, the mind? If we notice there is, then very gently leaning into that resistance, turning towards it, breathing it in and breathing out release, openness, softness. So whatever it is, it might be physical discomfort, might be a mind or a heart that's distracted or contracted, experiencing greed, hatred, delusion. Breathing in, acknowledging that, breathing out, release, softness, openness, metta, kindliness towards ourselves. Softening our habitual turning away from suffering. Staying present to ourselves, grounded, stable, fluid. Let's open our awareness and invite in a friend. Maybe we see there's an image or we feel their presence in our imagination. Just however it works for you, so they can be as vividly present as possible. And just as our chitta often closes down, we experience greed, hatred, delusion, distraction, contraction, and all the suffering that follows. Just knowing that our friend too, likewise, will have all those same tendencies. The way they express themselves will be different for each of us, but the basic tendencies will be pretty identical. Pulling things we want towards us, pushing things we dislike away from us, circling round and round when we're confused, getting rigid, sinking into sloth and torpor, getting distracted, excitable, skittering around in restlessness and worry. So we can breathe in a recognition of all that we share and breathe out well-wishing love, pouring into them. If we want to, we could spend some time just focusing mainly on the in-breath reflections and then some time focusing mainly on the out-breath reflections. Or you can start off with the rhythm of taking and sending. It's completely up to you. Be careful not to alter the breath or strain. Just allowing this process of exchanging self-importance for other regardingness to ride the breath. Breathing in deep awareness of this person's shared humanity, breathing out deep love and well-wishing towards them. May they experience a chitta that's vast, unsurpassable, concentrated and free, wishing that with each out-breath. If it gets overwhelming at any point, then broaden. Drop back in the body, feel the support of the body on the chair, floor. If you're feeling a bit dull or cut off or blocked or aversive, Breathing into that, releasing on the out breath, and very gently turning a little bit more towards your friend. Letting the image or the feeling of the friend to very gently fade, bringing the weight of the body to the foreground of awareness. Breathing in the whole body, full diaphragm soft. If we've got any discomfort in the body, the heart, or the mind, then breathing that in and breathing out release. So practicing Tonglen at all times. Turning towards that which we resist and breathing out love, care, tenderness, well-wishing. Now let's let go of any effort whatsoever. Just sit, absorbing the practice. And do the transference of merits and self-surrender in unison. May the merit gained in my acting thus go to the alleviation of the suffering of all beings. My personality throughout my existences, my possessions, and my merit in all three ways. I give up without regard to myself for the benefit of all beings. Just as the earth and other elements are serviceable in many ways to the infinite number of beings inhabiting limitless space, so may I become that which maintains all beings situated throughout space, so long as all have not attained to peace. Lovely. So we haven't got time to discuss that now, but you can take your experience to your groups as always. And then at 3:30, we'll have a longer practice exploring very similar things. This approach to metta bhavana, to a 5-stage practice at 3:30. So have a lovely, adventurous few hours with this endless magical display of your human life. And see you back at 3:30. If you want to unmute and say goodbye to one another, that's always a